The Transport Department says the new regulations in the e-hailing industry are designed to end violent clashes and rising tensions in the public sector transport. The regulations, which follow the recent signing of the amended National Land Transport Act, come into effect from today. All e-hailing drivers will now be required to undergo criminal background checks. Operators will also need to register for licenses that clearly define where they are allowed to operate.
Well, the regulations are obviously trying to bring order into the sector, to say that this is how the e-hailing is going to operate. You've got to have an operating license.
Right.
The biggest problems in the public transport sector has always been the TEF. The TEF wars and the routes, of course. And I think in this case we are saying the e-hailing, they would have to operate in a specific area or a jurisdiction. When you get out of your jurisdiction, go somewhere, you take your client somewhere else. We've got to drop your client and come back to your jurisdiction. And that is the crux of the matter, because you've got to stick to where your operating license says you should be operating.
MCB adds that the integrated transport plans will assist in terms of allocating areas for drivers to operate.
Those areas that are identified, we've got to work with the cities, because you've got to use the integrated transport plans of the cities in terms of identifying which area and where you're supposed to, including the physical address of the driver or the operator of the vehicle. If my physical address is Pretoria, for instance, and then I can't come and then be operating in Gauteng or in Johannesburg when I'm supposed my address is saying Tshwane. So those are the things that the regulator would have to look into. I'm not saying probably it's going to happen that way.
Let's now speak to Vhatuka Mbelengwa, who's the head of presidency at the National E-Hailing Federation of South Africa. Mbelengwa, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. So it's taken a decade for the draft to even reach the president's desk, and now we are seeing the fast tracking of these new laws. Unfortunately, amidst the escalating violence between taxi and e-hailing drivers, in your view, how will these regulations assist e-hailing drivers?
Good day. Look, we still have to investigate and engage, but to be quite frank, as I'm listening even to some of the clips you played of the parliament chair making references, the thinking is not correct, and I don't think they appreciate the tech disruption. This dialogue is a decade late, and I think some of those recommendations belong a decade ago, because what he's simply suggesting to say that you must work within Pretoria and go to a pickup point and start point is therefore saying the regulation should keep us prehistoric. The regulation should overlook what tech has done. The regulation should overlook how tech has opened the market. And that doesn't make sense. And I think this problem stems from government not leaning towards a tech-based solution to regulate the industry holistically. I mean, just before we came on, you were referencing the transportation violence in the Western Cape, and that the bus companies are being brought in to assist. Now, this is a legacy problem. It's going to reinvent itself within e-hailing, where we keep leaning on the same players and we're not looking at deploying laws and regulations that will make the industry competitive, so that there are more participants that can come in and nobody can feel like there's the custodian of this place. But what's important in the regulation, as he's saying, that we must identify participants. Now, this is currently happening, but somehow government doesn't have a database of it. And the regulatory body needs to then look into this. I think there are certain elements we're not looking into as to, for example, we must be more expansive. If we look at the world and other transportation disruptions that are happening, that are tech-based, we're due for more disruptions and we're not ready for them. You know, we look at what drone technology is doing all over the world in terms of logistics, courier services, moving things, self-driving vehicles. These things are at a very advanced stage all over the world. And as a country, I think we really need to, even in our policies, frame the position of ensuring that we must curate an industry that's going to compete healthily. We must have a tech for humanity policy position to ensure that the technology doesn't replace our drivers, because we need the work. Our economy needs the work. the dignity of the families in our communities need the work. I would like to see government engaging more younger people to expose them to greater research, who understand local dynamics and international dynamics, so we can have real ideas. The solutions being tabled are not futuristic enough, they're not ambitious enough, and they don't address the problem. They are reactive and they're not proactive.
And I wanted to
really
speak directly
to
to that, Mbelengwa. I mean, you speak about the engagement. You talk about government not appreciating tech disruptions. How much of an input does e-hailing have when these draft policies are being put together? Are you sitting at the table and really making those contributions with regards to where the future is taking us?
Oh, look, I can tell you who participates is very limited. I myself am very excluded because of the very strong opinions I offer government at times. We're meant to meet in Gauteng with the MEC Crisis Committee this morning, Friday the 12th. I got an invite 6 weeks ago, but I never got a venue or a time confirmation for today. So this is the problem. You know, you've got the same people who've been speaking in and amongst themselves for more than a decade, and they're not producing solutions. With all due respect to Minister Barbara Creasy, the plans she's trying to implement, I'm not too sure that her age will allow her to see her fully implemented. So we can't keep letting old people decide the future we need to live and keep being excluded by the government when we have to contribute because we've got strong opinions and strong views. The reality is the current response is simply just going to keep us busy. We're going to be engaged, but it's not going to address the problem. It's not going to address the fact that we need to then deal with this as an industry problem and not just e-hailing. You know, even minibus taxis have a right to participate and a right to earn, and it can't be undermined. You see, government needs to also accept its own role, that it doesn't have the tech capacity to have oversight on tech-based industries. And they need to capacitate themselves so that they can have the right oversight bodies. And we need to then honestly have these kind of conversations with government. And there's such a resistance to technology. We need technology for oversight. We need to see virtual ranks being introduced so that our municipalities can track how many vehicles or how many assets are within any municipality or any economic hub at any moment offering service, so that they can be controlled, and the technology can then direct drivers to say, this area is saturated, move to another area. This area is saturated, don't be in this area. And we can also then control the rate at which we let cars on. You know, organizations like Bolt have a determination to have a car 3 minutes away from everybody. But what's the cost of that to our communities, to our economy, to our drivers who need to earn a decent living? And a few years ago, the Competition Commission did stipulate our earnings are like slave-like wages. You know, we are being reactive and not proactive. And this concerns me, if I'm to be honest, you know, and government's lack of engagement, because we've said things about politicians and we've highlighted how engaging they are, is part of the problem, you know. You look at what's happening in Gauteng, if I can reference that again. You've got the MEC talking about launching an app that locals can use, which would be a better alternative. But you can't open a spaza and call yourself a competitor to ShopRite. It doesn't work that way. And such recommendations and such public statements highlight to us that government is not advanced and it's not mature in its thinking or its understanding of the sector, of the technology and the disruptions it's bringing. And government doesn't understand its role. Your role is to curate an industry so we can have a competitive, healthy ecosystem, not to then launch a competitive app because as government you feel you've got the authority to dictate where people should work. It's not going to happen.
Right.
You know, Uber and Bolt have over 150,000 assets which are on the road. They've built this fleet up in under a decade. You talk out of minibus taxis, have got to about 280,000. This is built over democracy. Your e-hailing sector is over-diversified far too rapidly. Why is there a Bajaj on the road offering public transportation? It's got zero safety features. It shouldn't be on the road with public transportation, and it's undermining the ecosystem. You know, we're talking about vehicles being branded, vehicles being identified. At this moment in time, we don't even know what identifies a vehicle in public transportation because there's so many of them.
So, Vhatuka, Sorry to come in there. Are there any pieces of this law that you appreciate? I mean, you've highlighted that which indicates with regards to the geographic areas that would be limiting to e-hailing drivers. But there are other regulations that speak to security, there having to be a panic button and also the updating of a profile photo in order to ensure client identification. Are there any pieces of this that you believe does not only work for e-hailing drivers but also for commuters as well?
So I think safety begins with the correct vetting of all drivers and the correct vetting of all participants. If that can be correctly done, it's going to offload the need for crime interventions and panic buttons, because right now the panic button, who's it going to? Who's responding? The already overloaded, undercapacitated South African police. It's going to be an ineffective solution. So where we need to fix it is at the point of inception. Effective vetting, effective testing, effective oversight will then prevent people being burnt and women being raped. Because right now you can go to the police. They can't tell you who are the people that have assaulted so many women for years, because Uber and Bolt do not collect proper identification. Even if it's a driver who requested and then assaulted somebody, in many cases, Uber can't re-identify that driver. And that driver finds himself back in the system with a new identity. We don't know how these things happen, but we also do believe, because they take labor from all over the continent, the vetting isn't correct. And we need to then reflect on this. And we should not be afraid as South Africa to hold a position to say, we need to secure works across for local participants as well. You know, we do need to, this speaks to safety. I mean, you look at your food delivery services, we have almost zero participation in that space. And that's a problem. And we can't keep thinking of e-hailing as that industry that's fighting with the taxis. It's a participant with its own rights within transportation. We must be recognized, but we must define operations so we don't undermine other operations, as we are seeing at the current moment. There's nobody e-hailing isn't undermining. It's undermining buses, it's undermining train, it's undermining taxis, it's destroyed meter taxis, it's destroyed the local taxi market within communities. And as a country, I think we hold the position to say no man left behind. And the manner in which these industries are being built, many people are being excluded. Many people are being exploited, Katla.
Lastly, Vhatuka, your take on some of the repercussions with regards to e-hailing drivers failing to adhere to the regulations, that they could incur a 2-year prison sentence, a penalty fine of up to 100,000 rands, and that regulators are also empowered to withdraw or suspend. Sorry, I missed you there,
jail the CEO of Uber first. Jail the CEO of Bolt first. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. You're saying jail the CEOs of Uber and Bolt?
First, because they have been undermining this industry. They have been causing violence. They have been deploying technology irresponsibly. It's too easy to want to keep coming back to us as drivers on the ground to say you are misbehaving when the tech people are deploying the technology irresponsibly. Why is it nobody has control over how Bolt and Uber onboard vehicles? It's the municipality's job to be able to decide and control influx. Why have the municipalities not been doing their jobs? Why has it taken so long for it to respond? You understand? We need to jail those people first. I'm not okay with laws that are going to further oppress us when we've been exploited within this space for over a decade, when government hasn't been able to provide us a proper permitting regime. Now you're going to come out and arrest us? No, it can't work that way. It can't work that way.
All right, Vhatuka Mbelengwa, thank you so much for your time. This certainly needs a lot more engagement between yourselves and the government, especially with regards to finding those laws that will work not only for commuters, but most importantly for those e-hailing drivers as well. That's Vhatuka Mbelengwa, the head of presidency at the National E-Hailing Federation of South Africa.